Hello, I'm Tom Watts with the BBC News. Rare demonstrations have been taking place for a second night in some of China's biggest cities as public anger grows against strict anti-COVID rules. In Beijing, people called for the release of fellow protesters detained in Shanghai. Demonstrations have spread to other parts of the country. Sophie Richardson is the China director for Human Rights Watch.
The protests are now taking place all across the country, including in Wuhan, in Urumqi, and in Korla, cities in Xinjiang, where the authorities continue to commit crimes against humanity. And so, meaning that the stakes are even higher for protests there. These are not isolated incidents, and the way that people are reinforcing one another's messages of solidarity all across the country is both extremely moving and courageous. But we also worry about what the authorities' response will be.
The Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab has attacked a hotel near the presidential palace in the Somali capital Mogadishu. Explosions and gunfire have been heard. Will Ross reports.
There were multiple explosions followed by loud gunfire, and minutes later Al-Shabaab said its fighters had targeted the Villa Rose Hotel. It's popular with senior officials and MPs. Several government ministers live there, including the Minister for the Environment, Adam Al-Hirsi. He wrote on social media that he'd survived the attack. Away from the capital in central Somalia, Al-Shabaab has been under intense pressure. In recent weeks, the jihadist group has lost dozens of towns and villages during an offensive by government troops and an allied militia. In August, President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed declared all-out war on Al-Shabaab.
A huge landslide on the Italian island of Ischia is now known to have killed at least 4 people. About 10 others are still missing after homes and vehicles were buried by a torrent of mud on Saturday morning. Our correspondent Mark Lowen reports from Ischia.
The impact of the mudslide is clear, with cars smashed up and battered, hurled into each other, mangled metal, shattered glass, and then some vehicles even tossed into the sea. Such was the force of the cascading earth and debris that poured down the hill here. It began before dawn on Saturday, when the deepest and most sudden rainfall on record here prompted a sudden landslide, burying houses, many illegally built and vulnerable.
Anti-government protests sparked by the death in custody of Mahsa Amini have continued in Iran. Students staged sit-ins at universities in Tehran and Mashhad, while others in the western province of Kurdistan demanded the release of detained classmates. A strike in support of the protests by lorry drivers has carried on for a second day, with unverified videos showing empty roads and lines of parked trucks in several areas of the country. World News from the BBC. The government of Honduras has sent more than 600 military police to the borders with El Salvador, Guatemala and Nicaragua as part of a campaign against gangs. On Thursday, President Xiomara Castro declared a state of emergency in several areas of the country. Security has been tightened in the Honduran capital, Tegucigalpa. Here's Leonardo Rocha.
The criminal groups which operate across national borders in Central America are involved in drug trafficking, corruption and extortion. The left-wing government in Honduras says there's been a worrying rise in the number of businesses and transport workers forced to pay money to them. Ms. Castro, who's been in power for nearly a year, says corruption, poverty and gang violence are the underlying causes of mass migration from the region to the US.
A senior Ukrainian official says Russian missile attacks on the country's energy infrastructure amount to genocide. In a BBC interview, Andriy Kostin, Ukraine's prosecutor general, said Russia was trying to make life impossible for Ukrainians to force them to surrender. Millions of people in and around the capital Kiev are facing power cuts in freezing weather. As many African countries struggled with food shortages and sharply rising prices, Zimbabwe says a record wheat harvest has put it on course to become self-sufficient this year. The Grain Marketing Board said over 325,000 tonnes of wheat has been delivered. This follows a government-backed initiative to increase the domestic production of wheat after bread prices shot up when the war began in Ukraine. And in the Football World Cup, Germany have kept their hopes alive with a late equaliser against Spain. The game ended 1-1. In the other matches, Croatia came up from behind to beat Canada 4-1. The Canadians are now out of the tournament. In a surprise result, Morocco beat Belgium 2-0 and Costa Rica beat Japan 1-0. BBC News.